and welcome to the magical world of events, conditions, and actions. Yay! All right, Kermit arm flails. This is the title slide, and really quickly I will say, if you have not hugged a sponsor today, it's probably because that would be awkward, but you can mentally give them a hug by giving them your email address, visiting their website, patting someone on the back, etc. My name is Ryan Price, and I go by Liberator with one vowel missing on just about everywhere that you see screen names, as long as I can get it. I have been doing Drupal for a real long time. I started building websites when I was in high school for like the school newspaper and the photography class and stuff like that. So I've been doing this for a minute. I currently work at a place called ICF. We do a lot of consulting primarily for government contracts, but obligatory thing is come look us up. We don't always hire a lot of Drupal people, but we hire a lot of technologists, project managers, soil reclamation people, things that the government, the federal government employs. Come check us out. I like a lot of things, but mostly it's working with people in the community and bubbles. That's more ICF. I also sometimes do this thing called the Drupal Easy podcast with my friend Mike. I was on the most recent episode, which is where I talk about integrating with a backend that we did on a pretty big project that's a CRM, and there's lots of complicated things. You could check this out sometime if you would like. The Drupal Easy podcast, when I'm not on it, is just as good, so check them all out. I want to talk a little bit about methods of improvised structures, like lashings. This is a raft that somebody built out of sticks and rope and milk jugs, right? You can achieve boat without being a master boat builder. You can achieve code without being an absolute expert in writing code for Drupal, which can be quite complex. The technical definition of latching is to secure items together in a somewhat rigid manner. It also means that you can take things apart. They are non-permanent. It's fairly utilitarian. It's not really built for usability. It's built for function. It is always improvised, and it takes advantage of reusable materials. The pieces I could use to build one lashing, I could take apart and I could build a completely different structure the next day. And there is a method to it. There's good ways and bad ways of doing it, and there's sort of like best practices that can be learned when you're doing this kind of improvised structures, and you can gain that knowledge by talking to other people, inspecting what other people have built. On the other hand, there's other means of doing improvised construction, like duct tape. These are the kinds of improvisations that we don't like because they create technical debt. At some point in the future, a person is going to have to come back and replace this fix. It's not going to last forever. It's going to leave sticky residue behind, and it's going to cause problems, even if it solves one today. It's not built in a reversible way, right? Duct tape, non-permanent. It's still utilitarian. It's still improvised, but it does not use reusable materials, and it is not often methodical. Sometimes it can be methodical, but these things are more like novelties than an actual camera case that you would use every day. It's fun. It might get you a lot of comments at parties, but you're not going to mass produce these things either, right? ECA is the lashing, and I would say custom code is a little bit more like a manufactured product that does something pretty well, but it doesn't have those disassemblable pieces, right? ECA is like this version of the tripod instead of this version of the tripod. We haven't really talked about what ECA is, but I feel like you must know a little bit about it if you're in this room. The idea of ECA is you are trying to describe the thing that you would like to happen rather than explicitly state it. So this is the building a sandwich argument. I shouldn't have to tell you all the steps on how to build a sandwich in order to just say, please give me a sandwich. It's a little bit more maintainable to have something like this because while it can take a little bit of time to learn how to create it and integrate it into your systems, if Drupal goes from Drupal 11 to Drupal 12, if the email module that you're using goes from version 2 to version 3 and something about that underlying API changes, your ECA models probably don't care that the underlying modules are getting upgraded. As long as the model can still be imported into your site, it will continue to work. It is resilient to change in a way that normal code may not be. And there's something that I call the phone loophole, which is even if you are not the one who created one of these business logic rules, I might be able to walk you through fixing it on the telephone. But usually if you're trying to debug something in a code editor, and I can't see the editor, and I can't tell you line numbers, and I can't tell you exactly what function names and variable names there were, I'm not able to talk you through fixing that over the phone. But in ECA, there's shapes, there's words, there's sort of self-documenting bits in there that would allow me, let's say that there's, very quickly I've realized my email is getting sent to the wrong email address and I'm on vacation with my family, but man, I really need you to fix that email address right now. I could probably talk you through changing the email address over the phone. Whereas inside of code, well, now we got to do a deployment, we got to run it through the linter, and we got to run it through the CI/CD system. That's not something that I can easily walk somebody through. And changing business logic without a deploy, you just get exactly the thing that you need, you hit the save button, and you move on with your life. And in order to get ECA to work in a production context, there's going to be some other tricks that we have to employ in order to make that a little bit easier, and we'll talk about those at the end. I feel like I wrote this presentation, and now that I got here, I'm like, I feel like I've already made the case to you about why is ECA cool, but I'll say these things anyway. Drupal, the whole point of why are we using Drupal as a CMS instead of creating our own custom software is because we care about the functionality more than the purity of the code, right? There is lots of underlying good things about the way that Drupal is architected, but if we could build it from scratch, would we include, so many different ways to send an email? No, of course we wouldn't. That would be a lot of duplication of work. But because we're working with open source, we're just going to focus on the features that we need for the project that's in front of us. Dries is famous for saying that Drupal is about using the internet to eliminate the middleman. And that's, I think, something that custom business logic that is written without code can help you get there. The programmer is like one of those middlemen, and not knowing how to code can be as bad as just having a really gatekeepery developer who doesn't want to allow you to make changes to things. So I believe it is possible for clients to demand low-code and no-code solutions to some of their problems, maybe not all. Or it is possible for programmers to go to their clients and say, you will reduce your maintenance burden by having me spend this time working on business logic in ECA versus business logic that's baked into a code that we must deploy in order to change. That's the theory part. This is the more practical part. So we're going to go through a couple steps with ECA models. We're going to take one apart. We're going to modify one. We're going to build a new one. We're going to take something that folds several ECA actions together, and then we're going to talk about also fun ways that you can trigger models inside of your site. So the deconstruct step, what do I mean by deconstruct? It's not to actually take down the Rube Goldberg machine into its principal parts, but instead to talk about what the principal parts are good for and try to be able to recognize that there's a tube structure followed by a tube structure followed by a tube structure followed by some dominoes followed by a can that's going to hit the next piece that's falling down the table, right? So how do we do that with an ECA model? This is a medium complexity ECA model, and it has some distinct parts. You can see on the far left side over there, those little circles are what we call the events. And it's sort of, if you were going to read this in English, you could say, when this event happens, and then you see number 2, if this condition is met, then number 3, do one of these things. In this particular case, the events are if a node gets inserted or a node gets updated. After we do that, we have to do a little bit of setup, but then on step 2 there, you see there's some question marks inside of this little box, and so that means I'm going to try to make a decision at this point, and I'm either going to go in one direction or I'm going to go in the other direction, and then I'm going to do some activities. All of the things you see in ECA, these little shapes, kind of do have a meaning. The one that you will only use at very certain special times is this little diamond. It's really kind of like a connector between other pieces, but it doesn't have any functionality in and of itself. The thing you'll be using the most is these circles and these squares, and these are events and these are actions. And all the context that starts on one side moves down the chain, and everything that this event knew about, this action can act on, and this action can act on, and this action can act on, and they all pass their properties along the further to the right you go. And we kind of organize left to right, partially because we're left to right language speakers, but you could do top to bottom, you could do other sorts of workflows here. It's not really set in stone like that. So some other examples, if you're asking about event, what's an event? Before I leave for work, condition is if there are dark clouds in the sky, the action would be bring the umbrella from the hall, right? And then another event could be after I leave for work, if today is not Friday, and if the time is before 8:45, get out my credit card and purchase coffee, right? These could be a way of thinking about things that you have to do. So my recommendation before you just start diving into ECA is think about some of the steps and some of the information you're going to have to collect before you ever start clicking on mouse buttons. If you're just learning, have fun, play around, dive into the sandbox, but when you start doing this in a more real way, if you don't know all the pieces and parts you're going to need, it could lead to frustration. Here's an example of an ECA model that says, after 20 minutes of inactivity, remind the user that their shopping cart is empty. And so the event in this case is an order update event, and that event can get fired by basically a cron job. And then the cron job can say, all right, I now am going to be acting on a particular order. I'm going to then look inside of the order items, which in this case is the name of a Drupal field, and I'm going to load all the information from that order items into a variable, and then where did I get that field? The field was a field on this commerce order entity. So you'll see these kind of screens and sidebars all over ECA, and learning how to read their structure. Sometimes in order to make the thing at the top make sense, you have to go all the way to the bottom of the form to fill out some field and then kind of come back at the top. This is not a wizard. It's not asking you for all the steps that you're going to need in between. But there's usually pretty decent documentation about what each field is supposed to do. So it's not super hard to figure out. Once you've built a handful of models, these things start making a lot more sense. So it's one reason why I think coming to a session can help you learn something like this. Other things we can do is we can actually modify an existing ECA model, and you might see when I'm building a user profile form a whole bunch of conditions. Well, I'm not really sure what is all going on here, but I know that the message is wrong. I know I need to modify this message. This is what I was saying. This is something I could talk you through over the phone. Not creating a brand new ECA model from scratch, but just click on that thing that says display message, type some different text in the text box, make sure you leave all the things inside of square brackets where they were, and then hit save. You have now officially saved a change to an ECA model. So let's show you what one actually looks like. I'm going to get out of this, and we're going to go over here. So this is our ECA administration screen. You can see at the top we have the ability to add a new model. So when you very first load this up, there are no models by default in ECA unless you've already imported them using like a recipe or another module or something like that. Then you can see your models, and you can see a list of events which this model reacts to. So this one says here, views bulk operations. We'll talk about that in a minute. This one says when someone inserts a new entity. This is when somebody logs in. And this is when somebody updates an entity. And then these are a thing that are called custom event, and we'll, again, talk about those in a little bit. But you can get a real quick overview here of what these models are all intended to do. You can give them version numbers. This matters if you are going to be tracking these things over time. That can probably help, just like you would do, let's say, with the revision log message on your nodes. You might want to update the version number to give yourself a clue of like, okay, well on the French site we're on version 1.1, and on the English site we're on version 1.2. So there's clearly something different before I go modify one of these things. And then you can enable and disable them. And some other really cool bits in here of like, you can clone something, so you can make a copy and then you can modify the copy, play around with that a little bit, and either make a brand new model or disable the old one to keep it around while you're playing around with the new one. Export them. They're very, very easy to export from one site to another. And if you are into building recipes, if you went to the other sessions about building recipes, they're really, really easy to integrate into recipes. This button, I think, is probably still not like 100% of what one might wish when they see a thing that says export as recipe, but the difference between export and export as recipe right now, as of today, is pretty similar as far as what's the end product, what you get. But it is a bundle, a little tar file that contains all of the XML and all of the YAML that is needed in order to create this model on some other site, or check it into your code repository if that's what you need to do, and delete. So that's a little tour of the admin screen, but let's go ahead and I'm going to talk a little bit about what this site is, my demo site here. This is a Pacific Northwest Drupal meetup directory site, and so we have some groups in here. Where are my groups? Groups. This is my groups. I have a group for Seattle, a group for Portland, and a group for Vancouver. If you don't know groups, users can become a member of a group, and by becoming a member of a group, you can get permissions over some of the content and activities that are related to that group if you're a member versus not being a member. It's going to be important in a second. And then finally, for an individual group, you can also attach pieces of content. So I might look under Seattle and look at nodes, and I should see at least one node. Seattle meetups are both virtual and in person. There's my article that's about that. If I look at this node here and I edit it, I have also set up a group field so that I can see that this belongs to a group. And just to get started, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove this from the Seattle group so I can show off a model that I made. We'll come right back to this in a second. So I'm going to go to my content screen. I have made a special view on my site that shows me all my content and then whether or not it belongs to a group. Oh, that's funny. I feel like this one should say Vancouver, but maybe I've already deleted it from Vancouver. Let's check. Oh, okay, this is not currently in a group. Okay, so currently no content is in a group because this meetup field is blank. So I'll show you really quick. I want to be able to add this content to Vancouver. And this looks exactly like regular views bulk operations, but this is actually special ECA only views bulk operations. This is something that I hope will get fixed at some point in the future, is that the ECA version of views bulk operations will be compatible with the regular one. Right now, if you want to do this, you kind of have to have two separate screens. But this was a case that I actually came across in a real client project. Was there was no action inside of the little drop down to say add to group, remove from group for the groups module. And rather than sit down and write custom code, I said, well, I would love to learn more about ECA. I'm going to check this out. So you can make these little special actions, and I can hit apply, and then it asks you, are you sure? Just like a regular VBO. And then now it says your content belongs to Vancouver, right? And same thing with Seattle. You hit apply, you say that's okay, and now your content belongs to Seattle. But the problem on my site is I don't have one for Portland. Is this big enough? Can we make it bigger?
Bigger would be good.
Okay. Better?
Yeah.
Okay, only two options, Seattle, Vancouver, so we're going to fix that. I'm going to go to, workflow. Under configuration workflow ECA. And to start, I'm going to clone my Seattle model, and then I'm going to edit the clone. And the first thing we're going to do is go up to this sidebar under the General tab when we don't have anything selected, right? As soon as I select something, this sidebar is contextual and will show whatever I've just clicked on. But to start, I want to give this thing a meaningful name, and I don't want it to be called Add to Seattle Clone. I want it to be called Add to Portland. These little ID fields, they all get random letters and numbers and characters in them. If you watch Jürgen, who's the creator of ECA, do his screencasts, you will see him typing meaningful names into these. I think this is a personal preference thing. I have done it, and it actually, in my opinion, makes these things easier to use, particularly once you get them out of Drupal into the XML files. So my recommendation is, if you are the kind of person who likes to wipe down your shower after you take a shower, use this field. If you're the kind of person who leaves your towels on the floor, just hit save, right? I can give this a version number if I would like. I can say this is an active and executable, and I can actually add extra documentation like created for PNW Summit presentation, right? Whatever we're going to say here. A lot of times down here you see this thing, extension properties. I have not used this a lot. This tool is actually a tool that's called BPMN, or Business Process Modeling Notation. And as far as I understand, it was originally created to map out activities that would be carried out in factories or like supply chain activities to show how goods and services move through a process. But you can just as easily use it to have data and objects move through a process as long as you trigger them correctly. And the language itself comes out as XML, and that XML is portable to other kinds of languages, but because this is very, very Drupal-y, you can't just go interpret them somewhere else. You could edit them in other places, but you'd be missing some of the Drupal stuff like the token browser, right? If you've seen this before, you know what it is. So having this editor inside your Drupal site, it's completely free. While it is branded, this does not require you to have a membership or an API key or anything. You can do 100% of this inside your Drupal site. But there are other editors that will edit BPMN for you if you need them for some reason. And so the way that this works is, as I click on one of these things, I can move it around, and the arrows will follow me. If I don't want those arrows anymore, I can hit the little trash can and they go away. If I want to bring them back, I can hit the arrow and I can click on something. If you are clicked on a box and you just click on another box, it assumes that you want those to be connected already. So it's pretty useful like that. And then some other things you can do is if you click on one of these things, there's this little dashed line. This is just for a little bit of documentation to say, you know, my first model. And you can just leave yourself some documentation inside of these models to let you know what's going on. That's pretty much a good tour. So let's talk about what this model specifically does. You saw the end product, which was it creates a drop-down inside of a views bulk operation. In order to get there, I need to have an event. So what event is that going to be? We're going to use a template. And right now what I'm going to do, I'm going to unlink the template. And I'm probably going to just open up my other model in a separate tab so we can refer back to it. So we'll pretend we're going to edit this again. So this model here, I'm going to get rid of you. Thank you. Thank you for your service. Okay. What event do I want to use? I always need to go to this template well. This is the workflow of ECA as it stands right now is I know I need an event, and actually I can, if I want, put all of the circles and boxes and diamonds that I need and all the arrows that I need without ever having to dive into the sidebar, right? I can visually map it out as I've sketched it on paper. I can sketch it in this tool to make sure the workflow is what I need it to be and reason about it while it's here on the screen before I ever really start configuring stuff. And I do, again, this may be personality dependent. I would recommend that you do this. I realize that certain brain types might want to work in a different way. They might want to work from right to left. They might want to get the leftmost one and the rightmost one and leave a bunch of question marks in the middle. You know, there's not really a wrong way to eat a Reese's in this case. So again, clicking on the event, and then we're going to pull up the template. This dialog here contains a lot of things. It also will contain new things as you add new capabilities to ECA. So this is one reason why I say getting your thoughts organized before you dive in here. You could very easily, you know, pick something that sounds good and it's not the one that you need. So doing a little bit of homework on the ECA guide, we'll show in a minute, is probably going to get you pretty far. So in this case, I know that this is VBO, and I know that this is execute, a views bulk operation. But then you see here there's two different ones. One of them says multiple at once, and one of them says one by one. In my experience, one by one is the one you want. But now it's going to ask me some more questions. It's going to say, hey, what is your VBO called? This is kind of particular to the action that I'm in right now, but when we were looking at the, I'm also going to pull up my screen really quick. Give me 1 second here, content. All right, when I was looking at this screen, this box down here contains some words, and we have add content to Vancouver, add content to Seattle. So in this case, then I'm going to say add content to Portland. Right? And then, do you want to have this show up only on a certain view or a certain view display? You can restrict that in this case, but I don't need that. I'm going to connect that to the action, which I have named add content to Seattle. And again, we can remove this link and then we'll add it right back again. So whenever this event fires, the following action will do something. Add content to Seattle. What am I going to do with it? I'm going to group, and then it is group add content node, and then it's going to ask you a bunch of questions. which type of group content is this? Is it articles, is it basic pages, or is it any kind of content? What's the group ID? This is currently, in this exact case, one of the sticky parts, but in this case I just have to know that the Portland group has got a certain ID, which I have to go find. Where's that little GR thing? Hello group, what are you? Portland. Portland is number 2. So we're going to type 2 in this box. That's all I need to do, pretty much, that is group ID number 2. What is the ID of the entity that I would like to add to the group? I'm going to get that from my context. So where's my context? Back here on my event. If you look under the template right here, after you click this button to apply the template, now it's going to give you a little bit of a description. And almost always it's going to name some tokens in this list. So it says here, event, the event, session user, the user that dispatched the event, entity, the entity of the event, and then entity type is the entity of the event under the name of its entity type. We might be able to work on this documentation. But you see there's a bunch of different tokens that are available, and they all have these little square brackets. The one that I'm looking for here is this thing, entity. Okay, so I'm going to grab that. I'm going to come back to my action. I'm going to say, what is the entity ID? That's not what I was trying to do. All right, I just know that's a square bracket entity. That's not very hard. Okay, this is the entity that I want, and just real quick I'm going to go check my example to make sure I did this the right way. Oh, I did this the wrong way. It's got to be down here. All right, excuse me. I don't know why this one versus this one, but it's different. How did I get here? Trial and error.
That's not the same token. I think your other one had
Did it have more things?
event.
Oh, event entity. In this case, event entity and entity are equivalent.
Okay.
But good eye. Thank you.
Only from troubleshooting all my own ECAs is going, wait, I used the wrong token.
Yeah. There's this little box down here that says replace tokens. 9 times out of 10, do not check this box. If you're sending an email, you may need to check this box, in my experience. But start with this box off. If it doesn't work, try it on. That's what I say. And then there's this last thing here which says group content value. So I think we do have to put something in there. In this case, no, we don't. That's in a different box. Okay. So in this case, the top line of this is very, very simple. Get an action, give it a name, and you'll learn in a second this name is actually very important. And then figure out what I want to act on, which group do I want to act on, and then this is basically just pass through. There's nothing really to do in this case. So this is the action itself, but the problem with Drupal is, what happened? Oh, I'm in, okay, this place. The problem with Drupal is, Drupal has permissions. So just because I've stated I would like this action to appear, because it's views bulk operations has to have an access check. I'm going to walk through this a little bit faster, but there is a particular event that you can do that says views bulk operations access check. You have to do this in certain cases with ECAs of there's one event that feeds another event. There's one event that decorates another event. There's one event that chains onto another event. So this is a special thing called VBO access, and in order to make this work, I have to have the exact same name here. So right now it says Seattle, I needed to say Portland. Come back. Can't see you. Okay, great. That's super fun. All right, add content to Portland. Those two need to be exactly the same or it won't work. After that, I'm going to do an action called get current user. You don't always have to do this, but I think just in my debugging state, I had this in here and I didn't take it away. So current user can be either the user who clicked the button or the user who's logged in right now, or you can define some other user if you need to. The user who is the author of the node that you care about for some reason, right? So there's a good distinction, right? Am I trying to get the permission based on the author of the node, or am I trying to get the permission based on the user who's logged in right now? In this case, the user I care about is the user who's looking at this view. So I mean the user who's logged in. But deciding which user you want inside of an ECA can be part of the battle here, right? Get the current user. Now I'm going to load the groups from that user. And again, this is something that is a little bit sticky because when I get this group relationship, I need to say that it's a group relationship, and I need to very specifically say I need it to be a group relationship of the type meetup, and I need to say for people that are part of group number 2. If I don't have this in here, it will not appear. So this particular one, if you have more than 3 or 4 or 5 groups on your site, this is going to get exponentially harder as you add more groups, if you let people create as many groups as possible. If you only have 5 groups on your site and you have, the library group, the finance group, and the math group, just adding a couple of little things like this is not going to be that hard. But the way this is right now, it probably would be better as a custom module because I have to keep plugging these ID numbers in. Kind of hard coding them, right? The last step is grant access. When you do this grant access, you just have to say yes. In the middle here, there's one more thing we have to do, but I'm going to go ahead and save just to show you what I'm talking about, because I feel like I've been talking a lot without showing you that I think I'm going to have to flush the cache. Come back. In my experience with the views-based one, I had to flush the cache. Did I forget to save at the top?
I noticed the box at the top still says Seattle. Is that maybe?
This one here, this doesn't really matter. But,
It still has that same activity ID that you made too, the VBO add Seattle.
which one? This one?
Yeah.
Yeah,
There.
so is that because you customized it in your other one, so now it's not?
Yeah,
unique?
I
Does it
don't.
need to be?
I don't think this matters in this case. But yes, this was one I was playing around with, seeing if the names would actually conflict with each other. I don't think they conflict with each other. I think this is namespaced inside of the individual model. I don't think they reach 2 other models. So I can really call this anything I want. But in this case, this circle here has to have the exact same string as this circle here, or they will not talk to each other. Let me hit save. Let's go back over here. Let's flush our cache one more time. And then we're going to reload. We're going to hope that it works. Okay, there's one other thing that's possible, which is I could not be a member of the Portland group, but as there's only one user on my site, I don't think that's the case. We're going to check. Portland. We're going to go to members. Yeah, I mean, I'm a member, right? There's only me, so it should work. I did this with Vancouver and Seattle already. Well, this is awesome. Live demos, add content to Portland, add content to Portland. I've done all the right steps. There's probably something small that we're missing out. All right, anyway, the last little bit of this, after I loaded the user and I say, yes, I want to grant, there's one condition that I had to do, which was when I loaded this, I loaded my group relationship, which is like a special kind of a database record, into a variable, and I called it group rel. And then when I got to here, I just said, does this actually have a value, right? In the PHP code, I would put the, bang empty or exists, right? If this has a value, I'm going to proceed. If it does not have a value, I'm just going to stop executing, right? There is no sort of like fail condition in this case. But if I did put a fail condition, maybe it would tell me why it's not showing up on the screen.
I know with VBO and regular actions, you have to define.
Oh, you know what else? You might be saying the right thing right now. You have to go to structure. Where do you go, structure? I'm going to check my view, and I'm going to go look at group. I might have to turn it on in order to make it work. Look at that. Okay. So inside of views here, this little thing, this is, like I said, this is right now, this is a special ECA bulk operation, and it doesn't smush in well with the regular VBOs. But now I can go back to content, go back to groups, and it should be there. Yay, all right. Teamwork. So yeah, now I can officially take this and one click add something to Portland from the screen. And I could obviously, if I had 1,000 nodes on my site, I could do it that many more times. You've been seeing some of these things here that say mail has been sent. That's another model that I have set up here, which is send email to users of a given role. I have node unpublished. I think this is what I'm thinking about, node unpublished. All right. Whenever I edit a node, check to see if that node is unpublished, load up its comments, and try to send an email to everybody that left a comment on that node. Right? So my other examples, I'm going to go back to the slideshow here, and we'll see a couple of other things. Oh yeah, there's my thing. If I unpublish a node, notify all the commenters. When I save a node, if it's unpublished, send a message to all the commenters. But what does that sending a message to each commenter actually mean? It means I got to load a list of all the comments, get one item off of the list, and send an email to that author. So in this case, this is the sort of before of the before and after model. You can see whenever I save a node, the template that I have used is update content entity. I'm going to do a condition. If you see a little text above an arrow, usually that means we're checking for something, right? And oh, this one, it got removed. I think it's something like value, check for a value, right? Compare two values, compare field value changed. I think it's going to be something like that, field value changed. And then we have to figure out which field are we dealing with. We're dealing with the status, right? So we're going to have to put something in here that says the status. Well, how do I find that out? I'm going to go to the token browser. In my token browser, I can find things about content. Is it content types? Or no, it's content, right? Nodes. This is one of those times when they use the word node where everybody else in Drupal uses content. Inside of node, something, 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 published status, right? This should be what I should be putting in. This thing really does not want to copy and paste today. Okay, great. While I'm doing a demo is when you decide to do this. Published status. Okay? So that's in there. And then I can choose, do I want to check this that it's true or check this that it's false, right? And I think all I really want to say is, has this value changed? And then I might have to check again later, like, is the current value the value that I care about, right? I might have to do this 2 times in order to really get all the logic that I need in here.
Is there a condition just for published?
There might be.
Because I don't think you have to.
Let's look.
Status, yeah.
It could be status, right?
There was.
Yeah, sometimes when you're doing these comparisons, you really just have to do like compare. Or is accessible, is new. You can do is new, original field as value. So a lot of the things that you want are in here. It is possible to extend ECA too if you find something's just not working the way you really want it to. These are fairly easy to create. We're not planning on going into that today. But yeah, something like comparing fields, right? A cool thing you can do here, when I say here I said load comments, it's because this is going to actually load up all of the comments, no matter how many there are. My next action, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get one item from the list. So load a single entity, where'd it go? Sorry. Load a single entity. My comment CID. Where did the thing go that I'm checking out? In the right place. In the right place. Alright, well this is the advanced example. I thought this was what I was thinking of. My comment CID. So where's my comment coming from? My comment is coming from over here. I feel like this is broken. There's no names in here. I think this is not what I want. I apologize, everyone. I confused myself. Great. This is what you want. I bet you this is going to have the thing that I want. Look at that. Okay. Comparing values. Is the status equal to unpublished? That was the thing I was looking for. Load comments. Okay, here we go. Get the first comment. Yep. Okay. Pardon me. Unprepared presenter over here. Let's go back to the beginning. If the node is saved, if it is unpublished, load all of the comments. With this action, I can get an item off of a list. Which item do I want to get off of the list? Which list am I acting on? I'm acting on the comments list. And what am I going to do? I'm going to take the first item, I'm going to take the last item, I'm going to get a specific index key, I'm going to get some other value, or going to get something that was defined by a token. In this case, I'm just going to take the first thing off the list. Let's do it the first thing off the list. And I can load up the contents of that comment, and I can decide to send an email to that author. If I know I'm only going to have a few of these, I could really just repeat this again, right? Get another comment, load that comment, and email the author. Get a third comment, load that comment, and email the author. But obviously, this is not sustainable. This is not how we do things, right? So we can take all of these and say, we don't need you. We can instead, where it says here, get first comment, grab all of these and scooch them over a little bit. And now we get to hit this magical other button here. And this is what is called a gateway. The gateway exists for when you need to point to some bit of the code, or you need to create a branch at some arbitrary point. The gateways themselves don't really do anything. They can't accept templates. But if I want the next action after email author to be go back to this point, the gateway is the way that I grab that thing. Let's see if we can do this. Like that. Right? So now when I'm finished with this action, I'm going to go back to this point, and then instead of get the first comment, it's going to be get the next comment, right? Does that make sense? All right. Somewhere in my slideshow, I have a good screenshot of what this really looks like. There we go. We're going to name the model. We're grabbing events. We're giving them templates. Make sure you name things correctly. Check out your templates. And then keep moving on, right? This is kind of a recap of what we were just talking about. Email the author. And I made a whole bunch of transitions, y'all. This looks really nice. So this was the Willy Wonka moment. I pressed all the buttons except for one, and that was the gateway. So in this case, now I drop my gateway down here, and when you get to that load comment, since it can only grab one, you just tell it, go to the gateway and go back to the beginning. And don't forget to hit the save button. If you don't hit the save button, it doesn't get applied, and you can spend a lot of time going through your site and nothing happens. Don't forget to add it to your view if you're doing a views bulk operation, right? These are the things that can really get you.
Brian?
Yeah.
So, do I understand correctly that this would actually send, the number of emails that get sent would be the number of comments?
The number of emails that get sent is the number of comments.
Okay.
So a good example of something like this, I worked on an intranet site, and we were doing task tracking, right? Customer support request comes in over the phone. Somebody fills out a little piece of content somewhere and says, you know, customer would like 30 chairs delivered to room 235 on this date. Somebody please leave a comment to say that you acknowledge this request. Somebody comes by and they leave a comment. But if at some later date somebody comes by and updates what the request says, everybody who's left a comment needs to get notified. Right? That's a use case for I need to email all the commenters, especially if it gets removed. Right? That's the unpublished version here. Yeah.
Just to follow on from that, did anything have to change in the little action for loading the comment to indicate that you're loading some specific index, or just that gateway automatically handles that?
When you do that load next, load an item off of the list action, one of the choices was remove the item from the list and load one. So it's modifying the list as every time. And when it gets to there are no more items in the list, it will just stop executing. So some of the things are weirdly implicit about how ECA handles especially things like lists. So yeah, I was saying we got to check some more things about the node being unpublished, but I think I kind of did show that. Okay. Other things that you can do, this is a game that my 6-year-old likes to play sometimes. It's called Lightbot, and it's about getting a robot to move along a track, and he can only do 5 things, but with these 5 things you can be very expressive. And so if a 6-year-old can understand how to do a repeated procedure and store that inside of a register somewhere, I bet your clients could figure it out as well, right? And basically what this person is saying is whenever you drop this procedure into this thing, I can do that action again and again and again. And that was sort of where the loop entered into our last example there. Another thing that you can do inside of ECA, and you will see this in a lot of the examples, is you can abstract out whatever thing that you want to do at the end of your loop and put it in another part of your canvas. And now this might have its own chain that you want to follow, but if you tried to insert this into your normal flow chart, it would just get completely unwieldy and you wouldn't be able to follow what's happening. So just like the little robot here, think about basically, creating functions inside of your models and breaking out bits of functionality to make them easier to follow the path visually. It's like Inception. Okay. Some other examples that I saw that were really cool. This was from DrupalCon Portland. John, who is not in this room but is at the conference today somewhere, showed this off, and he talked about basically when he wanted to look at these work slips, like work activities that needed to be done. He wanted to make sure that 2 of them were not happening at the same time. And so at the top here, you've got load the slip, and then load the start date and the end date into each their own variable, and then try to figure out how they have conflicts. But how are we going to try to figure out how they have conflicts? There's an action in ECA which says, load all of the contents of a view. But what are the arguments to that view? It's these two variables, right? So I can say, node contextual argument number 1, start date, contextual argument number 2, start date. If that returns anything, I'm going to check, does it have at least one value? If it has at least one value, I'm going to do something, which I think in this case is invalidate the form. I'm going to do another thing in tandem with that, which is I would also like to get Unix timestamps for those dates, and then I would like to make sure that this event is not longer than 3 days by doing some simple math. So again, that's what we just did. I was pointing at it instead of using the red boxes, but there you go. Another person who's here at the conference let me use this action, and this is an activity that basically has to check and see if a certain amount of fields have changed. So whenever I get new content, I want to send an email, but also we're going to group all of the things that have to do with this content type sort of into one model. So this actually, in some people's sites, could be a totally separate model. In this case, they've kept them together because if you want to export this and version it and install it on your dev site, install it on your stage site, you can keep all of the things related to this one model in one zip file, right? So this is now a totally separate model, basically, and it says, if one of the ABCs changes, I would like to send an email and show a message on the screen. If one of these DEF fields changes, I want to show a different message on the screen, and I want to send an email to a different kind of user, and so on, right? These can get really complicated and really big, but if you're able to figure out how to break them down visually, it at least lets you start figuring out where's the place where I need to go make the change, or where's the place where I need to add some new activities. And then we talked about those custom events, those little named functions. You can do those in here as well, right? What are some of the cool ways you can trigger ECA? Use bulk operations, we talked about quite a bit. That's what it looks like. Inside of Drupal Commerce, there's lots and lots of events that get fired off. User added item to cart. User, changed the cart from this status to that status. An item is getting ready to be shipped. There's so many things you can do. User used a coupon, right? Inside of web forms, a reason why you might want to have an ECA is to modify a web form. If it's already been submitted, maybe I don't want the attendees to be able to fill out certain fields, and I don't want the judges of the contest to be able to fill out other fields. So I can actually use ECA form actions to enable and disable fields based on your user role, right? Some other really cool things that exist is this Drupal remote dashboard. This basically lets one Drupal site send a webhook to another Drupal site saying, hey, this module has a security update and needs to be updated. I want to notify you, sort of mothership site, security updates are available. All right. Things that are coming down the road, recipes are out there. Being able to stick ECA models inside of recipes, along with all of the content types and all of the fields and all the permissions that you would need, and even some sample content to be able to demonstrate it, is right around the corner. And then there are some really good examples showing artificial intelligence being used inside of ECA. So if you can, if you're in the world where you're trying to get artificial intelligence to do something, let's say provide alt text on images, well, I could then create a view that says load up every image that does not contain alt text. Now use ECA to load one image, determine if that image is owned by any nodes, load the title of that node, load that into the context for the AI, load the image into the context for the AI, and try to generate a meaningful alt text for this image inside of my ECA. It is possible to do this kind of stuff. Also integrating with outside APIs, like we said, webhooks. If you need to send or receive something, it's pretty easy to do those kinds of things inside of ECA if you're so motivated. And also, if you have a backend API that you need to access, there's I believe ways that you can go and fetch things with like a curl request and stuff that's already exists. You don't have to write custom code to do that kind of thing. So go fetch something from this API, parse the JSON data, look at one of the values, decide if I need to make some action, maybe on a cron job, maybe when somebody hits a button on my site. One thing I started specifying with ECA, and the client decided they were going to take their money overseas, was for a game engine. So I kind of got the idea originally because if you've ever looked at any game engines, they all use these visual editors to begin with. And the client started telling me, well, they have an online game. And let's say that there's a series of 4 of these online games. If you play all 4 games, I would like to give you a badge. Well, how do I know that you've done that? Right? I'm going to have to store some information about that you have played the game in an activity table somewhere, and I'm going to have to store your user, the entity ID of the game, and the date that you played it, right? How am I going to find that information? I could use ECA, load up a view for all of the games that this user has ever played, and now compare it to a list of games that I care about in order to make this badge. But they didn't just have 4 games, they had 50 or 60 games. And they didn't want to just do one kind of promo, they wanted to do essentially an infinite number of different kinds of promos. And I said, you're going to be on the phone with your programmer every single day, you're going to be deploying new code every single day, or I can teach you how to make ECA rules and you can create the business logic yourself. And so this was a thing we were planning on building out this whole system for them, and like I say, they took their money elsewhere, but I'm pretty sure they still did something very similar to that after we designed it for them. Places to go to learn about ECA. The ECA guide, especially the library page, there are some really good examples. Anytime that I want to create a model for something, I go look here first. Also, pretty much everything on the library has a video attached to it, a YouTube video of Jürgen or one of the other contributors building out the model, so you can kind of watch it be constructed in real time. If you do have people updating ECA in production, you have to have a way to get those changes out of production and back into your site. But if a deploy happens before you're able to hit the button, you've now actually reverted your configuration. So you might need to get something like the config ignore module or the config read only module to allow you to say, you know what, all of the configurations that belong to ECA actually don't overwrite those whenever I do a config import. Leave them alone. I've also done this with web forms before. If I wanted the client to be able to edit web forms, I could go and say, please import all of my config except web forms by using a tool like this. And then we're able to set everything else into read-only mode so that even if they try to go to the site information screen and try to change the name of the site, it will say, no, you're not allowed to change configuration. Sorry. How do I run ECA on cron? There's some good examples in the library to talk about how to do scheduled publishing. Views bulk operations is a separate project, but it is an official separate project. It's just not part of the ECA core. You saw some of those little status messages I was showing, so sort of debug my email sending. That's the mail log module. We talked about commerce just a little bit, but that's a separate download. Web forms one is a separate download, but can be very useful, like I was saying. And the events they provide are things like if a form's being validated, when it's getting saved, you can display custom messages, you can validate fields, And you don't have to mess around with Form API and Web Form, which everybody knows is just no fun. Being able to do the resource conflicts, that one I said that John did at DrupalCon Portland, highly recommend that talk, is a good one. Workflow allows you to modify and react to changes in workflow states. Cache, this is where it gets really deep and you do crazy stuff with cache. Like I want to flush the cache whenever somebody saves a certain page or updates some field. Being able to do things with users and logins, redirect them after they've logged in. If you log in and you're this status, I want to take you to that screen. If you log in and you're this role, I want to take you to another screen. Organic groups we showed in my example today. And then there's a whole other thing called context, which lets you actually like show blocks, block visibility rules, or enable, disable menu items, play around with taxonomy terms based on what's available at the time. So there's a lot to cover in here, and I was trying to just give you a nugget to get you started. So get to lashing, everybody. Let's build bridges. That was my thing, and I do have a copy of these slides, and if somebody wants to see specifics of something that I did, I'll be up here for a little bit. And then I'm going back to Portland. So thanks, everybody.